today.
Oh yeah.
Child Development 205, Chapter 11, Physical and Health Disabilities or Disorders. And so welcome. Really love seeing everybody, even on a Thursday night, getting towards the end of the semester, which is kind of nice. I think after this week, we have 5 weeks. What? Yeah, like a month and some odd. Yeah.
Gosh.
I know. You guys remember at the beginning was like, let's get into class and learn the syllabus and learn to look at this and I get the book and now it's like, whew, all right, okay, we can do this. We can do this. So I want to first start off and ask like some foundation questions. Like number one, what do you guys already know about this topic? What do you want to know about this topic? And what are some things that you're still confused about or nervous about or intimidated about or anything like that? Whew. And that includes me and Professor Fernandez, since there's only 4 of us tonight. All right, so who has a basis of knowledge already? Cece, you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, my question is more about like the asthma part. Like I know like of course a lot of kids have it, but I don't ever really see or like see people like make mention of it unless they have an inhaler. You know what I'm saying? Like you, that's not, I didn't think that was so common for, you know, a lot of children to have until I see like an inhaler. So
Isn't it
how
wild?
do you know? Yeah, like how do you know, like even if the child needs it as well? And like, what if none of us know? The parents don't know, the teachers don't know, but like if there was something that deals with asthma, how do we
That's a great question.
assess?
Let me ask Professor Fernandez. I know that sometimes children are already born with it. Asthma can have a genetic component. There are some families who have asthma, but some kids can have it separate from their family. So what would you think in your head if you saw a kid at school that you thought maybe, but again, we're not doctors. We don't diagnose. We merely approach the parents and say, how are they with their well baby checks and any, that kind of situation.
Well, I mean, worst case scenario, CC is the one you're speaking about, that nobody knows this child has asthma. They're, in PE, they're running the mile and they can't breathe. That's a serious situation. And you would call 911. I mean, if you had no idea, because they're going to start turning blue. And then they're going to go into shock, like it's scary. And so you're going to call 911. You would, best case scenarios, you'd have a nurse that was on campus, and the chapter did speak about this, with all of the budget changes, especially in California, our nurses are like our specialists. So they're on, one campus on Mondays and another campus on Tuesdays. Well, I don't know if you can plan out your natural disasters where the nurse is present, but if they are not, it falls upon the teacher to know what to do. So at that point, you call professionals and you'd call 911. And then at that point, you would know that the child had asthma, and then you could get that written up. And so you would have an inhaler on site. I know my own daughter, I have 2 daughters who have asthma. They never have it when they need it. Thank God their mother carries it everywhere she goes and has it at their schools. Both of them, I have them at their schools. So a lot of it is parents, because kids are just, learning. They don't understand they could die if they don't get the medication, and that it is really serious, and they get scared fast. So you would call 911. And then take all the necessary precautions. An inhaler is it's really super, like you said, it's super easy. It seems like nothing. So what's the problem? But I think the chapter spoke that it is the number one physical limitation. And all of it is asthma. So I think you're spot on to do asthma. And maybe just thinking about this all the way through, CC, maybe it's a question if you had a class, you would ask on a teacher at the beginning of the year. You know how those teachers start asking, tell me a little bit about your child. Maybe that's something you just put on there as just a prudent teacher. Now that I'm thinking about it, it sounds like a great idea. And a parent just checks it. So you have in your bank who is asthmatic. Right. It's a great idea.
Right. And it is, like you said, you don't see it, but it's the same thing as like diabetes or the things we've talked about before. Intellectual disabilities, you don't see it. Learning disabilities, you don't see it. But yes, this one, when a child can't breathe, they could die. So it's this thing. And in the little ones, if you're working with smaller ones, they may have not developed asthma full symptoms, but they might come to you and say, whatever, or they might not even say, I can't breathe, but they start having these behaviors and you're like, oh, I see that they're wheezing or, things like that. So sometimes the little ones don't have the language for it, but we as professionals can say like, something's going on there. Like, come sit with me. Let's take a break or whatever. And so it's kind of interesting. Sometimes, again, like you say, nobody knows. Put it in perspective. Not all kids are born with asthma. They do develop asthma. Now, here's a funky story. When I was in junior high school and high school, I did have asthma, but it was interesting because my symptoms kind of went away it was maybe about 2.5 years. And I was really active at the time. I was like in band and I was like running and on the grass and the whole business. And so my symptoms kind of went away. And my mom, who was a nurse at the time, was like, I didn't know asthma could go away. And they said, well, there are certain types of asthma that could be allergy related. And they're only a certain time of a growth and development. And we both were like, what? Learned at that time, like at the end of my foray into the inhaler, it wasn't never really that bad, that when a child grows, an adolescent, they don't necessarily grow at the same rate. So their outsides and their insides don't necessarily grow in synchrony. Had no idea. I was like, what? I thought like when you are getting bigger and getting taller, all of your parts are getting bigger and taller. Not necessarily true. Sometimes the insides grow a little bit faster than the outsides. And so now you have a finite area for the lungs to expand and contract. When we both were like, what? It was really kind of interesting. So it was basically, I was having a growth spurt on the inside, and I hadn't gotten, in fact, I got 2 inches taller after high school. So my body wasn't just puffing out. It was like parts were growing. And you'll see this when kids maybe have potty trained and then all of a sudden they have to pee. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons for that, but sometimes their bladder grows and their body hasn't. So when you say this kid never had asthma, now they have asthma, it's very possible. Very, very possible. Sometimes the asthma never goes away. I have a friend who's had multiple surgeries on her lungs for like parts that just died. Yeah. Like her lungs like got necrotic, like just bad, and it's like, wow, like I didn't ever know. And hers will also flare if she eats red dye, like the stuff that makes licorice red. Mm-hmm. Even if she has like a cocktail with that stuff in there, done. She's like having a full asthma attack. Mm-hmm. So there's our bodies do what they're going to do, but sometimes there's an onset that you don't see, and it has to do with the growth. So like sometimes there's that growth spurt around 2, 3, 4, and then there's another one at like 7, 8, 9, and then there's another one at 20. And so depending on, again, growth patterns, you might see asthma be different, be worse, be better. It's different times of the year. Yeah. Different times of the day. Yep. Also, if they're worried or sad or sniffly, it's all going to kind of like work against each other. But here's my last story on asthma. It is very, 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 very protected under IDA. Now I have an interesting story. And then like around the first grade, this new family came to our school, and like we really kind of like connected with the family for a little bit. They had moved out of like South Central LA to find a better school system at X, Y, and Z. And so the mom was working out here at a bank, and the daughter came in, and she was like mixed like Peyton. And so it was nice to have like somebody else. Anyways, they were telling her the following year, they said, we denied your school transfer because you can. I think they lived in Westminster, but the mom worked in Tustin. And so this child went to school in Tustin. So you can have your child go to school in the city that you work, right? So they said, we deny your transfer. You have to go back to Westminster, because she had so many tardies. She had so many tardies and missed days of school. We're going to deny your transfer request. And so, of course, she calls me and I give her my attorney's phone number. The attorney drafted a letter. You cannot discriminate against a child who can't breathe. And if it's on there, she had a 504 and it was been identified at the school. It's not out of the blue. We weren't making it up. And it was like, she has asthma. This is a protected health issue. You can't deny them access to the school because she was late or she had missed school days. That is a function of the disability.
Right.
If you're rushing around in the morning trying to get a 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old ready for school, and then they have like an asthma attack, you're gonna be like, oh no, I'm sorry, you can't have an asthma. Like, it's gonna happen. So
Right.
sure enough, she was like, that doesn't seem right. No, I was like, no, it's not. It's not right. So yeah, it's a thing where people go, well, asthma is not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. If you can't breathe, you can't go to school, you can't learn. If you're not oxygenating your brain, you're not gonna.
It made me think of this now that you say that. I have actually recently I have a patient who was having sleepwalking, like walking out, and she's 6. I mean, like hopping fences, leaving shoes. He caught it on video multiple nights.
Wow.
Cops are looking for her. We're trying to figure out what in God's name. And she gets asthma. She has a albuterol and inhaler. So she's hooked up every morning and then has her inhaler throughout the day. Long story short, like you said, come to find out that she is having asthma in her sleep and she's waking up to basically she can't breathe and she's like sleepwalking, but this is all from asthma. And so now she gets the albuterol or the inhaler or the albuterol at night and morning. Sleepwalking's gone.
Isn't that wild? That shows you that, yeah, when your brain's not oxygenated, what is your brain going to do to try to make you feel better?
Right.
Yeah.
Great. And you would ask her, like, she was hopping fences. I mean, I was just like, oh my
Hopping
gosh.
a fence at 6. That's
yes.
wow.
What is going on? And when the doctor called me and said he thinks it's asthma, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's not. And sure enough, we tried the medication and it was fixed.
Isn't it wild? Yeah, Peyton had a few. I mean, this kid never gets sick, but he did have a couple where he had the albuterol couple. I mean, because before the age of 7, he was under 25th percentile for height and weight. He was just, he was 3 pounds at birth and he just did not catch up till about 8, 9 years old. And so he just would have issues with, breathing, and then it kind of went away. But yeah, I could see where the body's just trying to figure stuff out. Yeah, that's why they call it practicing medicine, right?
Yeah.
They didn't say perfecting medicine.
No, it's a great idea, CC. It's great. It's great that you keep that in mind because it's a huge issue. It can affect obviously in ways you just don't know. Yeah.
How can your brain manage itself or your body manage itself when it doesn't have enough oxygen?
Right.
Right. So, wow. Yeah. I like that you started out right off the gate with asthma. I would say out of this entire chapter, that's the number one thing to take away from here. Yeah.
I think so too.
Very cool. Anything? Let's see. Molly, do you have any, what is your basis of knowledge so far with kids with physical and health disabilities?
I don't really know. I'm interested to see how much I do know from this. I feel like all I know is, I don't know what I've seen with kids in wheelchairs and stuff. I don't really have much knowledge. So
good.
I don't really know what questions to ask
well, that's good. It's good to acknowledge that you have limitations, and it's also good to say, I don't even know what I don't even know, so I don't even know what to ask. That's fair.
Exactly.
It's fair because how do we know what we don't know? Yeah, so this is good. I like how the chapter does start off with Sir Stephen Hawking's, where again, we started off this entire course with looking at all learners, accepting all people, talking about person first language. As far as we know, he had the highest IQ on the planet before his passing, right? Even higher than Einstein, whoever we thought was the highest IQ on the planet, whatever. But just because somebody's body is in a wheelchair doesn't mean their brain is. And so I really do like that they started off with this. And he has quite the story. And so I encourage everybody to again, read up on him, or that little YouTube video is a quick little, we're not going to go down that, but it's a quick little intro. This is who he is, this is where he's from. And then there's a whole movie on him and things like that. It's very, 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 very cool. So again, just because somebody's body has limitations doesn't mean their brain does. But excuse me, as we go forward, we're also going to find out that people, just because there's a body limitation doesn't mean that they don't also have other things that could go on. You can have a person with multiple categories, and physical or orthopedic issues could be in addition to that. So again, yeah, there's a lot to know and there's a lot to learn. So please jump in. Please jump in. Alicia, do you want to do that thing that you were talking about earlier to get like?
Well, I started out, but when we recapped and when we meet up before we meet with you guys, I kind of gave my little synopsis of the chapter.
2 cents.
Yeah. I felt it was a little bit redundant. I felt like they tried to make pages they didn't need to make. I feel like this is just a feeling. I feel like the physical is a poster child for disabilities. It's really easy to look at somebody in a wheelchair and realize, oh, they obviously have, some kind of disability. Super easy. Makes a lot of sense. So they're like the poster child. It's a lot harder to do that with an intellectual disability. It's a lot harder to do that with autism or even like asthma, CC, as you were saying. And so this chapter to me is, while I think it's like the face of what we do, and it numbers wise, it's not. You just like asthma is your biggest number. Yeah. I mean, in your classroom, if you're in a gen ed class, first of all, most of these kids will be in gen ed. It's the smallest amount of kids we have. Most of them are in gen ed. And the ones that are in special ed also have other impairments. It's not just a physical limitation. A lot of the issues here are going to be a broken arm or a broken leg for a period of time. These are not chronic issues. And then the areas that they talked about that were chronic, like asthma or epilepsy, those chronic issues, to me, and I could be totally wrong, they are other health impairment, which is quite different to me than a physical disability. And so that was kind of my little takeaway from the chapter. Nothing too, I just felt like there was a lot of information. I mean, I always find interesting, like how they categorize the physical. And then like when you get into the disease portion, like the sickle cell or the arthritis, the juvenile arthritis, even the juvenile diabetes. Again, though, you're seeing those kids in gen ed, they're going to the nurses, they're supported. They're not getting resistance. Nobody is having to fight for those services. Not one single person.
Right. So if somebody was born with like missing an arm from here down, I mean, if it's their right hand, but they're left-handed, what accommodations and modifications do we have for them? Do they need?
Well, that's the first thing. Like first of all, that's easy to see. Right. Duh. The parents have been working for the last 5 years on accommodations. This isn't like, oh, all of a sudden they started with a mild impairment. Now they're not talking. Now they're hitting themselves. It's not regressive. So we've had 5 years of saying, okay, now, when it gets to school, what are we going to do? Like, we're able to forecast the future with these kinds of things. We're able to say, okay, is he a candidate for a prosthesis? Are we going to have to make some physical limitations? So we can forecast with these kinds of disabilities that we cannot. It's like if you're in a tragic car accident, God forbid, and you're in a wheelchair, you can change the course of your life. You can say, I need to redo my shower. You can, not mind you, all of the grieving. I'm not taking that apart. That is different than a child born with and exactly like you're still learning, Professor, every single day what you need to modify for your son to have one good day. Yeah. Like do you see the difference? Like it's very but the poster for us is child in a wheelchair.
Right. So like basically if I was looking up even graphics, like images for this PowerPoint, and I put in physical disability, the first thing that's going to pop up is a wheelchair. And you're like, oh, okay.
I've been in the field 25 years. I've worked with maybe 10 kids in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Same thing with our other professor with a preschool. She's like, yeah, I get one a year. Yeah. Maybe. And it's really interesting. So I do have a student in one of my other classes who is in a wheelchair, and I didn't ask her, but she told me how it came about. She goes, when I was 7 years old, me and my cousin or neighbor or whatever, we were playing gymnastics on the couch, and it was nothing bad. I didn't like fall and hit myself, but like we were just like, playing around. And the next day I woke up and I couldn't move.
Mm.
And so it was most likely a pinched something or other. And she was in the hospital for 6 months and never really regained the ability. And then her extremities have started to pull in.
Yeah.
And so she's very capable. She's very, very capable. And she's like, it's really hard though too, because she was like, my relationship with my mother changed because she didn't take me to the hospital for 3 days.
Mm.
And I was like, wow. Wow. That could be in a way neglect, which could be a felony.
Well,
Like if that was
you
an
know-
open wound, that's a felony.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because as I'm reading this chapter, I don't know if you guys felt this, but COVID struck me when I was reading this a lot, when it talked about infectious diseases.
Yeah.
And like something like that, or like encephalitis, or what's the vaccination we get for the teenage kids? Meningitis.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things where a parent would say, like, okay, let's just take some Advil, let's put your head
Right.
on some, let's get, I don't know if we
Listen here, that's why I say, listen here, drama king.
right, exactly.
If I was minimizing, yeah.
Right. But you read about these infectious diseases as at the end of the chapter, and all of a sudden you're right, they're not walking. So I like that, to me, is quite different than autism. That being said, maybe the outcome is the same. I mean, if we come full circle, the outcome is
I have something seriously ironic. Today, Peyton's one-on-one aide texted me and said, he's having a little bit of trouble breathing in PE. And I was like, two things. I was like, okay, did he take his allergy pill? Number two, I wonder if he's going to have that teenage asthma like I had. I mean, we're not genetically matched at all. He's adopted. And then I was like, oh, is he being a drama queen? I had those boop, bop, bop in my head. And I was like, okay. But he has yet to get a physical, like, but now I'm be like, oh, buddy, it's time. It's time to go get some lab work. And, he's 14. He's gained 50 pounds this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like, you have a different body. So there's this thing where we, as parents, we might be like, what is it now? And then like, yeah, that might be a thing. Let's go. Let's go.
Right.
So, and it's weird though, because I know for him, we waited. I mean, like I know that he's not great with needles, but we did get him vaccinated, and not right away. Like we waited a little bit, like after the window for him, because he's 14. But he took it like a champ, and I said, listen, first of all, you're my only kid. You're irreplaceable. Okay. I'm not going to fight tooth and nail for you to get you, to have you, to raise you, and like kick the door down in your schooling. To lose you to COVID when Daddy and I are both vaccinated and Grammy's like a retired nurse, like it makes our culture is like, make your choices, but this was our choice, right?
Right.
He took it like a champ. We found a compound pharmacy that like gave him a soda and a candy bar at the end. So I was like, he's like, when's my next one? So we were really lucky. He did take it like a champ. And so there's this piece where it's like, I can tell you, like, nobody likes extra needles. Nobody does. But there's a point where you just have to approach it and just say like, it's the thing. And I know, and parents look at healthcare differently, and I don't even want to say people have different access to healthcare. Healthcare is pretty accessible now, whether it's like with this program or that program or this through this and through that, it's pretty accessible. Kids are well covered. And so every once in a while you might hear a parent who says, oh, we don't have health insurance. Your child's covered. You just have to start doing some paperwork.
So even when you're talking about how like they're covered, what about like the ones that are, say for instance, homeless? Like they'll be able to give their child schooling, like they'll be able to still like take them to school. Because my mom used to work at a daycare or like something with childcare where they took care of like homeless children. Like they were of course homeless, but their parents dropped them off there. They was able to still provide the schooling, but the medical part sometimes.
Okay, so two things on that. Great question, because this is a huge like underbelly that a lot of people don't talk about. So this is good. I'm glad you're talking about this. Two things. A family who lives in their car, homeless. A family who lives in a program that services homeless people, still considered homeless. A family, the definition of a single family home or even an apartment is one family per apartment. In Southern California, we have oftentimes 4 families in one apartment. So 3 of those families would be considered homeless. Getting your child to school, remember, public education is free, right? If that particular family is connected to, let's say they're at Laura's house or something like that, Laura's house hooks them up with Medi-Cal. It's part of the program. It's part of any sort of program will do that. And then there's also outreach for people who are living in their car and whatnot and things like that. Basically, excuse me, as a social worker, when I had homeless clients, I worked at Orange County Mental Health Outpatient Santa Ana Civic Center. When we had families, even if it was a single parent, single moms, single dad or whatever, and they were homeless and they had kids, I could get them into a program like that. If there was a child in the conversation. If it was a single man, nearly impossible. Single woman, a little bit easier. Child in the program, I could find a bed for them. Once they're in that bed, the program like hooks them up with everything. Now, again, there's people who are kind of outside that system and living in their car. I've had students here living in their car. I've had students like living in their car with their parents still, like as adult, like it's like society is hard, like things are rough. But at the same time, when there's a kid on board, there's a lot of services and programs. I'm not saying kids don't get missed. They do, and they can fall through the cracks. But unfortunately, it's not common to have a child get missed. So like, for example, Alicia, if there was a child who came to your program and signed up for your program, for some reason, I know that you have like a system to get a child into your program, but for some reason, if it was like, hey, I'm applying to the school to put my child in this school, and you thought that they were homeless, how would you handle that?
Well, my husband is a first grade teacher and had a homeless student right before COVID. So the year before COVID. And I felt like it was a huge eye opener for me. First of all, I wanted to take this kid into my house. My heart went out to this mom who they slept at the bus station. So there was no car, there was no home, there was nothing. He came to school, he looked clean every day. My husband said, like, washed, teeth brushed, whole, just couldn't have more cute hair and face, just beautiful looking. The problem with that was he wasn't there all the time. So mom would get kicked out of the bus. And then let's say she took a bus down to Huntington Beach and he would be gone for a week and then he would come back and then he's back in, but he's lost this whole week of curriculum. That was problem number 1. Problem number 2 is we are online for everything. And when you are homeless, you don't have Wi-Fi unless you're standing outside of a McDonald's, which a lot of times he would do, or go to Starbucks and do it, but then not. So my husband had to stop giving him homework online and actually give him paper homework. That makes my heart feel bad because you're making him, he looks disabled to me now because he's the one going home with paper, right, and nobody else is. And then just the fact he wasn't there a good third of the time because there was no home. So these issues, are a huge problem, I think, in California. I mean, I don't know, I don't live in any other state, but if my husband, and he has told me that he's had multiple homeless in his career. So it's a huge issue.
And you know what, just to put a little point on that exclamation mark, LA City College now allows students to park their cars overnight.
To sleep.
No, excuse me, Long Beach City College.
To sleep.
Long Beach to sleep.
Well, you can only imagine, and I don't mean to be divide the sexes here, but between like a young girl sleeping someplace, I just couldn't even.
It's not safe.
Yeah.
I had clients who said that they would ride the bus all night and like fall asleep on it and ride the bus all night until they got like kicked off the bus. But I couldn't imagine doing any of that with a child.
That's a great, Cece, that was a great, and you know what, I don't think that's not even addressed anywhere, and certainly should be in the future, because it does cause, it does cause a type of disability when you aren't in school to be educated, or when education isn't a priority, because under Maslow's hierarchy, it's
food and shelter.
Yes.
Food and shelter first. And, and then again, how do we know that they're accessing medical care? We don't. Like how do you connect? How do you follow up? How does a child learn in that sort of circumstance? And then we're seeing like, oh, I wonder if this child, I'm seeing some things at recess where he's having, or whatever, at activity time where he might have asthma. Like, it's so hard to connect those things through because
Oh.
it's really, really hard.
And it's, you know, these parents, a lot of them are scared. They won't pick up the phone when the teacher calls. They are scared. Many of them are not here legally. They don't understand that they have rights. They don't understand that they're entitled to education no matter what. So you can't even talk to them. They're scared to death. And then the ones you can talk to are genuinely trying. Prior to COVID, this one woman had a job on and off. It's just the consistency of it. So, you know, and then that job comes first, not getting the kid to school. The job comes first. And so it really is just a different priority than ours. It's quite a unique situation. It's such a great topic.
And I like how you brought up the piece about the child was there and then the child was not there and then the child was back. You know, that can also happen with kids in the foster care system. Yes, they may be removed from their home, but they're in the system, and then like they're trying to, you know, maybe the system's trying to say like, okay, well, let's keep you at your school while you're like figuring out the home situation. It's like, it's a lot, right? And then there are certain districts who are really at the mercy of migrant workers.
Yes.
So my sister-in-law, she's in Central California. She goes like, I would have a classroom and for like a week, and then like the week later, there was like a 60% disappear rate.
Are they working in the fields? Is that what? Yes.
Because the family would like move.
Yes.
And she was like, and then we would have to combine classes, and then another teacher who had like the least amount of tenure would like get reassigned to a different, it was just like shuffling and
like the way our agriculture, like when we had summers off and worked, like that is like each community almost knows how to educate. Like, you know, I can't think rural Missouri is having the homeless issue that we are having, but are not addressing our homeless issue is infuriating for our kids. Absolutely.
Right. And so there's a lot. How do we manage even in this situation, like how would you manage a child with a 504 and IEP in that regard?
Oh, I don't, all I wanted to do was give close. That's all. I felt so bad. I don't even know. I'm too, it's just, I would not be the right teacher.
I'm telling you what, I had this situation where I was at the car wash on 17th and the 5. It's called Santiago Car Wash. And I used to go there and get my car washed, whatever. And one day my car's washed and I'm like way off to the side, like on the phone. And this dad, I'm not kidding, had 2 kids. He had a kid who was maybe 3, and then another kid in his arm. And I'm not kidding you. Behind the car wash, there was like a ladder. He literally had a kid on his hip, pulls this ladder over the fence, like a ivy covered cinder block fence, and climbs, like gets his 3-year-old up and over this ladder into, I have no idea what's behind there. Is a neighborhood. And then has his baby on the hip and he climbs this. I was dumbfounded.
And you're a social worker, like by nature. Like
I literally called the police. I mean, I didn't call 911. It wasn't emergent, but I was like, hey, and then I had kind of befriended like a guy at the little, you know, the stop and go or whatever, the little stop mart or whatever. It's like, hey, what's happening over there? He's like, oh yeah, that's Mike, you know, whatever. He just lives over there. I was like, okay, so these guys knew this was going down. And I was like, okay, not only did I call like for a welfare check, you can call the non-emergent line for, you don't have to call 911, just call, you can Google whatever. So I put Santa Ana non-emergent, you know, and I just, you know, hey, I just want to call for a welfare check. And then I also found the association for that like neighborhood. It's kind of like Floral Park or whatever, something like that. And I called, hey, hi, Barbara. Just this is a concerned neighbor. I was like, listen, I'm not going to judge, you know, and maybe they lived in a house there, but I thought that was really inappropriate to do that with your children. Walk the hell around, because right now that is shady. That is shady as shit. And I was like, I'm going to be that crazy white lady calling, because that was all shades of not right. I was like, all shades of not right. And they were well dressed and well groomed. And I was like, listen, I'm just reporting on what I saw. I don't know what goes on past the fence, but I checked later and the ladder's not there. So let's just say something changed. I was like,
Something happened over there.
was-
Yeah. Oh,
just,
I
I
that's a great
just was
question.
like, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I would have let that one go. That was
Yeah.
just outside. It
yeah.
was just outside. I was like, oh, but the point of all of this is to keep our eyes on our kid and do what we can do. You know, sometimes you can't do a lot. And as a social worker, I hit that wall too, where I'm like, okay, well, this little girl is X, Y, and Z, and I want to take her home. And this, and like, we've all been there, even though you learn not to do that. We all get there at some point. There's a moment. And the same thing is going to happen with these medical issues. The funny thing is I think, like you said, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we as a species, we know how to take, when somebody's having a medical issue, we kind of know what to do. Is this a first safety? Like
Right.
we go, but when they're having a learning disability issue,
Right.
or a sensory issue,
Right.
or a behavioral issue, or dysregulation, we still are kind of spooked on like, what if we
And that's basically what I was speaking to, that this group is the easiest group you could lay your hands on. If somebody handed you a child with a crutch, you are good. If you can't help them, that's on you. Like,
yeah, like it's a weird, it's almost like our animal instinct kicks in. It's like, let me help this child calm down or breathe or feel better, or bandage a cut or whatever. I was hoping in this chapter they would talk a little bit more about like universal precautions and first aid and things like that. But that's why we have health, safety, and nutrition class. So take 112.
okay, there you go. Take
So
one.
this chapter is broken down in like physical and health disabilities. So like one is health, that again, they could be short-term, long-term. Most of the things that are chronic here are long-term, right? But then there's also physical disorders. Now, again, if you are having physical or health disability and it's temporary, like Alicia said, like a broken leg or a broken arm, we've all had something like that. Does it mean that you're disabled? Yes, temporarily. Did you need a full IEP? No. Maybe a little nod from the teacher that you're going to put your leg up, you know, until you're in the soft cast or whatnot. Yeah. So there's things that there's workarounds. When I was in the 6th grade, I was playing football and I broke my tailbone. That was super fun. I was like in a halo for like a week or two, and I could not sit in a desk. I just couldn't sit in a desk. I just was like, I still to this day, I'm still like cringy, a little bit cringy. Like now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, oh, yeah, a little cringy. But I had teachers who were like, if you need to lay on the floor, that's fine with me. I laid on the floor for like the remainder of like 6th grade. Like, and I know a lot of teachers right now are pretty open with like flow in their rooms and things like that. But at the time that wasn't very common. So there's a piece where, you know, we can make accommodations, because really the outcome is, how are we educating the child and what are they learning? If they're in pain, how is that? Like my hip thing could not fit in a chair either. So it was like, we figured stuff out. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was like, so again, physical and health disabilities, just like every chapter, there's severe ones, there's mild ones, there's temporary ones. There's ones that start at birth. There's ones that come with an onset. But again, there's different ones that get categorized with, we mentioned like a head injury that comes later. That's called traumatic brain injury. And if there's other health impairments, that's a whole other category as well. So this one, again, yeah, this is kind of like a lot of common knowledge in this particular one. So again, anytime you see these equal signs, that means that there's a definition in the chapter. But again, the physical and health disabilities, a lot of times are really identified before you have them. And going back to that piece for Professor Fernandez, you said most of these kids are going to be in gen ed. Here's my 2 cents on gen ed. Take this class, have a good idea, have a foundation, and be a gen ed teacher. A lot of times I get students who take this class and they go, oh, but I'm not sure special needs education is for me. Then don't do it.
Right.
We need people who know this stuff, the whole class, take this class and are in the gen ed class and understand the connection with all brains are different and their sensory needs, and a 504 is okay. And just knowing this stuff or taking this class doesn't mean you have to go into special needs. If you end up in gen ed, or put it this way, even in a special needs class, you have typically developed people, so with different disabilities. So it's this piece where don't ever feel like if you don't go into special needs that you're wasting this class or wasting your knowledge. We need you in gen ed.
We're going to have more gen ed teachers than we do have special ed teachers.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
We need well-trained gen ed teachers. We need well-trained gen ed teachers. I can't tell you how many gen ed teachers I have had who were like, but he looks fine and he's choosing not to do well today. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay. All of us need gen ed teachers who know the difference. Well, who needs support, who doesn't need support. If this person who has a 504, maybe they don't need as much support today, maybe they need extra support today. We need a range of people who understand neurodiversity, bottom line. So take this knowledge and run with it. It doesn't matter where you land, just take it and run, right? And again, we've already talked about mobility, how people can get around. And again, in later chapters, we'll talk about mobility experts, especially when there's somebody who has vision impairments or low vision and blindness, low vision blindness or hearing impairments. Neuromotor impairments, great way to think of this is neuromotor, right? So if there's a disconnect between brain and body, something like cerebral palsy, right, that's neuromotor. And then muscular skeletal conditions has to do with our muscles and our bones. So if somebody's missing a part of an arm, part of a hand, that would be considered a muscular skeletal condition, things like that. So and I like how the book kind of breaks it down. So neuromotor, again, all these originate in the brain, right? Epilepsy, those are like, I explain it to Peyton as like little storms, lightning and thunder in the brain. Sometimes it's the whole brain, sometimes little pieces of the brain, parts of the brain. CP, cerebral palsy, a lot of times that shows up at birth, right? And we'll talk more about CP in there, and there's some cool videos in the module. At CP, once it's diagnosed, it's not regressive, it's not progressive. That's your limitation. It just means your brain, like, so you'll have people like, I think there's one of the videos that has a little girl who says, my brain doesn't really talk to my ankles very well. Right. But I also have a friend who has CP who's like H to T CP. Right. And she's like, you're just jealous that I get prescribed Botox. I'm telling you, she does, because she has like certain twitches.
Right. No, we use it all the time.
Yeah. So she gets Botox and it like freezes certain muscles and relaxes others. She's like, you're just jealous I get Botox. Mm-hmm. It's covered by my insurance. I was like, seriously. Spinal cord disorders, that's like spina bifida, but again, things like it could be something small, it could be something large, but somebody with a very distinctive or birth defect, like a major spina bifida, they're going to be in the hospital. Like you won't see a reclining wheelchair.
You know, spina bifida, if either of you have any opportunity to spend some time looking that up, the kids that intrigue me a lot are those kids, the incomplete spina bifida. I have little ones, so I have the opportunity to change them, potty train them. So oftentimes, whenever I'm going in to change a diaper, it's the first thing I look for is a dimple on the back. Mm-hmm. They have emotional. They look a lot like they're autistic. They honestly do. If you've done any research, that incomplete spina bifida, so it's a spinal cord, it's a neuromotor impairment on the spinal cord. And basically what it is that when the skin was fusing over the spine, that was open, and you can have an incomplete or a complete one. And if it's complete, it's open at birth. And so then you're going to have you're going to have loss somewhere on the spinal cord. So the higher up, the worse the loss, the lower down, the better. If you have an incomplete, your skin is formed over it. And so the impairment is mild and oftentimes not noticed until potty training time comes along. And so, or they have a little bit different of a gait, or their feet kind of go out just a little bit. And then if you follow them in school, you'll see the little girl that's ever so quiet looking down. She has language, she can talk, she can engage, she can read and write. But the teachers will always say she was just a little bit quiet, always kind of on her own, didn't have a lot of friends. That's not very common for girls. Girls tend to have, and there was potty training issues. They're a very, very interesting subgroup to study.
Right, especially in girls. I mean, and even if you had a presentation like that, you may think missed autism or missed ADHD inattentive. We'll talk about that next week. A lot of times girls get missed, but if they kind of manage in the middle, nobody thinks twice about it.
And the research on the spinal cords, guys, I mean, every day it changes. We caught an incomplete spinal bifida on a 2-year-old little girl. We caught it in the clinic. Mom sent her to New York, had surgery, and she will now be able to not wear diapers. That would have not been the case had we not have caught that dimple. So the surgeries, the neurological spine stuff, I mean, the rapid technology, and this chapter did talk about technology. It is such an amazing thing that's affecting so many of these kids. So it's always good to get in there and just do a little quick look over.
Just again, keep your eyes open. We'll talk more about that, how you can intervene as we go. But muscular dystrophy, we don't see as much of that anymore. That used to be kind of a deal back in the 50s. Remember about the 50s? Yes. Talk about 50s and 60s. Polio. You don't see polio anymore.
Thank God for the vaccines.
Right, because of vaccines. I dated a guy in college. His dad actually had polio, and it was like, oh yeah, that generation had to deal with that. Like my parents' generation had to deal with like, oh, you got to touch the polio. It's like, oh man.
Right.
A good movie to watch, and I didn't put that on the movie assignment. It's called The Sessions, because the actor is actually like a fully not disabled actor, so I didn't want to put that in there. But a good thing if you want to learn more about polio, and this guy like slept in an iron lung, like they lose the ability to actually breathe at night. So you have this thing like a capsule that helps you expand your airways so you can breathe, so you don't die at night. Yeah. So it's called The Sessions because this guy was like trying to get a girlfriend, and he called in a therapist to help him get a girlfriend, and she was a sex therapist. Very sweet. It was Helen Hunt too. It was a very, very sweet movie. Very, very sweet movie. Very sweet movie. Okay, and then MS, multiple sclerosis. That stuff kind of shows up later. Again, that's like where your brain is not connecting to your muscles and your joints and things like that. Sometimes it shows up later in life, but sometimes it's young. You can see it younger as well. And then the muscular skeletal conditions, again, the muscles and the bones, arthritis, anything itis is a inflammation, right? So this is arthritis is inflammation of joints. Kids do get it. I mean, we can get it older in age, but there is juvenile arthritis. Limb deficiencies, meaning can be missing a half a finger all the way up to here, or both. Skeletal disorders. What would that be? What would a skeletal disorder be?
Anything affecting the skeleton. So anything where like you could have like we have kids that have 6 limbs, like another digit. That affects the way they write, that affects how they hold things if the parents choose not to amputate it. Same with the digits on their toes, which is becoming more common. Actually, we're getting more and more. Yeah, it is super interesting.
And maybe like that fragile bone, there's like a fragile bone disorder where kids are like super duper fragile.
Bone. Yes.
Soft bone. So things like that. So again, no matter what we see, no matter what disorder or issue or challenge that somebody has, again, person first, and just be present with them. Doesn't matter if a kid's missing a finger and if they stub their toe and they're frustrated, or they, whatever, tripped and fell, be like, you're missing a finger, so I'm not going to come for you. No, you're present and you're in the moment. It's a human being who just needs support. So again, these categories just help us kind of identify other things. So if you have somebody who has muscular dystrophy or polio or MS or CP or even epilepsy, they might not be walking clearly, or they have a different gait, or they may be more accident prone. It just gives us ideas to be more supportive in that environment. Again, we are not our disability. We are who we are. Yeah. Special healthcare needs. This is, again, everybody can have special healthcare needs, but sometimes people have daily, chronic, lifelong, right? Other health impairment, and we'll talk more about that when we get to ADHD, which is next chapter. But some of these issues do kind of like fall over there into OHI. And then we talked about chronic illnesses. That's like a lifelong, and infectious diseases are things that are communicable. So now we switch into like health disabilities. You can have a physically perfectly formed child who again could have asthma or blood disorder. Blood disorder, something like sickle cell anemia. What's the other one? Hemophilia. Some other things that are like in the blood you wouldn't see. But again, when you have these ideas of like this child, we identify them with sickle cell or hemophilia, they may not clot their blood well, or they may bruise really easy, or a bruise could send them to the hospital. It's like, there's these things, again, you give children the dignity of risk, because you can't have a child sit down on a chair the whole time while everybody else is at recess, but you just keep in your mind, the safety issues. And if there's an accident happens, then you have protocols. So again, this just helps the child, really. Childhood cancer, unfortunately, kids do get that. Congenital heart defects might be something like a murmur or a hole in the heart or things like that. I have a friend who had heart surgery as a child. Yeah. Cystic fibrosis attacks the lungs. That's a genetic disorder. And kids like that are constantly coughing, and technically they don't live, life expectancy is about 30, 35. It's getting longer now with technology, right? Diabetes, again, we'll talk more about that. And sickle cell anemia, I mentioned that with blood disorders as well. Now, infectious diseases are things that can be communicable. Hep B, that is, but here's an interesting thing. Hep B can be really, really, really managed now. So can HIV, which is really kind of interesting. So again, let's start from the bottom up. If we are professionals, we have to have our TB test. Why? Because TB is like COVID. It could go everywhere. And so the funny thing is that we have to do that all the time. We have to do it to get a job, but people are still like, I won't get vaccinated. Fine. We have things in our society that we already do automatically to keep society safe. It's this, people are just upset about new stuff, but fine. Storage infections. This is an interesting one. Storage is an acronym for more, it's a little bit dated, not gonna lie. And we'll talk about each one of this. This is like syphilis, toxoplasmosis. Like, it's very, very, very rare. But again, we'll talk about toxoplasmosis you can get from like changing the cat litter.
That's how I remember it in biology. Like if you're pregnant, don't change the cat litter.
Right. And I worked with clients. I had a client who was HIV positive, and then he did get toxoplasmosis from helping out around the house. He forgot, he had to learn how to walk and talk.
He had HIV. His immune system was suppressed. So then this bacteria gets into it, and he
breathe it in. It actually attaches to your spinal column, and it'll actually work its way up to. Yeah. And so little things like that. So it's very rare. But again, if we're talking about kids who are homeless, kids who are living in crowded situations, like you can have things like that, or kids, or kids who have like eating disorder, like pica. We'll talk about that at some point. Like kids who like eat dirt, like it happens. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So these things can happen, but again, if you get to know the kid in your program, then you're going to see like this kid's acting differently. Like I wonder what's going on. So again, it just basically breaks down all these situations here. And the interesting thing is that after asthma, out of this whole chapter, diabetes is probably the most common thing that you'll see. Yeah. Type 1 diabetes is the ones that usually people are born with, and type 2 is the ones that we develop. Now, again, some kids have both. Some kids have one and it turns into 2. Some kids you come to your program with one, or sometimes they're in your program and then they develop. You're like, oh, we just uncovered it. And sometimes kids can get to like teenagerness before they even realize, right? If they might have mild symptoms. And so, oops, geez, where did I go? There we go. And so there's a lot of different things that go on. Again, if you work with kids who are medically, what's the word? I want to say medically fragile, because that would be, there's the term medically fragile for kids who are like sick a lot. But like, for example, like, Professor Fernandez, you work with kids who are just other than typically develop, and they have lots and lots of things going on. So how do you manage all these different things? I mean, there's got a lot of things going on your plate, and different kids with different
Well, I mean, unless they were medically fragile, like you speak to, I wouldn't. Like if they were if they had diabetes, I wouldn't work with them. They would be managed by a medical team
Mhm,
and a nurse, unless they were missing a lot of school.
mhm.
I wouldn't necessarily work with them. Same with like, I'm just looking at the chapter sickle cell, unless they were inflamed
Mhm.
and missing school. Type 1 diabetes, maybe if they had like they had an epileptic seizure because of it. But in terms of just straight medical, I don't know. I've never.
Yeah, these kids are again gonna be in the gen ed classroom.
We have
Right.
basically that right now. We
Do
have the
you?
diabetic kid. We have like 3 or 4 on the spectrum, one diagnosed, one on his way to be diagnosed, 2 not diagnosed. We have the language delays and stuff. But yeah, we have a lot. We think we have a new kid that just started who possibly is ADHD. And they're just all, that's our whole class, like our whole class. And it's basically like one-on-one. I mean, we only have 3 teachers in the class, but we're like one-on-one with them as much as we can. It's, I got 2-on-1 basically at all times. Like,
That's why we have 2 arms.
yeah.
Right. And so again, you're not going to see a lot of these. Look how low the prevalence is. But again, asthma, 8% estimated prevalence in US children. This is not just students identified with special needs. This is 8% of any school. Let's round that up to 10. So if you have 1,000 kids in your school, 10% is 100 kids. I graduated 2000 in my high school. So that's 200 kids with asthma. It's kind of a lot. And by the way, that number goes way up, like doubles in urban environments, like cities. The pollution, the air's less clean, right? Type 1 diabetes, 0.25%. Now, some of these numbers are a little bit old, but again, epilepsy, children have 2 or more seizures. They didn't say 2 or more seizures a day. They said 2 or more seizures. Basically, you have the second one, that locks in the diagnosis, and we'll talk more about that. More than 300,000 children under the age of 15 are affected, and there's so many different types. We'll talk more about that. CP is not a disease. It is not progressive. It's basically like a programming error. Like there's a disconnect, and that's where it stays. Sickle cell disease, again, that literally means that your blood cells, instead of being like these little round sort of donuts with no hole in the middle, like your blood cells like round, but it's kind of like a little bit less in the middle. Like your blood cells are like literally like a moon, a sickle. They call it a sickle. And what happens is they all kind of bunch up on each other, and then they crowd in, especially the capillaries. And so you'll see swelling, you'll see bruising, it's very, very painful. So, but again, 0.02 of all children, and it does have a genetic and like an ethnography to it. So African-American children would have a higher prevalence of sickle cell anemia, but you'll have something like Tay-Sachs disease in like the Jewish community. They almost like say like, are you Tay-Sachs? I'm Jewish, I'm Tay-Sachs. Like it's almost like a badge of honor. Hemophilia is very common in all different ethnicities and things like that. But again, it's screened for at birth, so you would kind of know. And again, there are symptoms that, again, like Professor Fernandez said, like if you have a child who said, yeah, this child has sickle cell anemia, they have a few years before they come to your program. That the parents usually figure that out pretty early. Doctors can figure that out really, really quickly. Cool. Good. Okay, so types of physical. Yeah, this basically means right here, number 2, they're going to be in gen ed. They do not require a 504 or an IEP unless there's something else going on. So let's keep going. Okay. So if they are identified with something that requires special education, again, we have characteristics and challenges, then we do like a 504 and IEP. Again, it just depends. So again, here, don't forget that absenteeism sometimes is an identifier for some illnesses going on. Okay. And the solutions here, like every chapter, accommodations, modifications, assistive technology, peer assistance, which is, it's always nice to teach our peers to help each other out, but it's not the peer's job, right? It's okay to share, to build a skill, but it's not their job. UDL, distance ed, and related services. And I love how like distance ed is like the same thing as saying online classes. That's like the fancy term for it. But it's so much more common now. Like it's a part of our culture now, distance education. When before it was like, oh, well, we can teach students over Zoom. Yeah, that's called like 90% of students right now. Let's see. Yeah, that's all you need to know on that one. We'll just keep going for. So again, there's some tips here, tips of teachers for students with sickle cell disease. Again, it's a blood disorder. A lot of times when kids are little, they don't have a language for it. So if you have, let's say, Molly, you had a kid in your program where they said, oh, this child has sickle cell disease, do some research and keep some things in mind. I mean, and again, the research is always changing or updating, things like that. But always, number one, always hydration works for every child, even you and me. Like hydration can clear up so many different things like digestion, head, lethargy, everything. Water first, water first. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Kind of on topic, but kind of not. Is there like a certain I don't know if disability or disease or whatever, like with a kid who doesn't eat but drinks way too much water?
What do you think about that?
We have a girl that is very like super skinny, just very petite, doesn't really talk. Mom's taking her to like speech and stuff, but she just like, well, we can't even give her the water at snack time. We have to wait until we try to get her to eat and then give her water. And she just like, her diaper's full all the time. She's constantly drinking. It's like, I don't know. She looks like, you know, like a child who's just skinny with the big belly, like kind of thing.
Interesting.
Has mom taken her to the doctor and had a full physical?
No, she's going to speech. She has taken her to the doctor, but there's not like, they don't think anything. I don't know. They haven't said anything about it being an issue. They just think, oh yeah, she's picky eater kind of thing. And mom wants to help. You know, mom asked us today, like, should we switch over from she's only getting 15 to 30 minutes with a speech pathologist, but she's going to switch. We encouraged her to switch to the 3 hours before she turns 3. And, but so I know mom is she's not one of the moms that is in denial, you know, but it's just so interesting. And I feel very.
So yeah, we don't diagnose. We're not doctors, but in the back of your mind, if a child's thirsty a lot, that could be an indicator of diabetes. Could be. I have worked with children on the spectrum who like that sort of behavior for the sensory input.
The sucking,
swallowing, water, peeing, wet diaper, warm diaper. Attention.
She's one of the ones that when the kid who is diagnosed autistic, his shadow came in and she's like, that kid and that kid, not diagnosing, but you should talk to their parents because I'm worried, you know, kind of thing.
She could be.
And she was one of them. So
yeah, again, girls get missed a lot of times because they just kind of fit in just enough.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, just so some of the language, like Elisa, like said, has the parents say, like some of the language is like, oh, when's her next well baby appointment, or what did the doctor have to say, or like, you know, just keep it light and curious, because again, she's in your program not for that reason, but it's always good to identify the needs. And it looks like your mom is your partner already, so you're in good shape.
And you could ask the mom too, have you noticed how much she likes to drink? Do you notice?
We have. And she says, like she just loves water. Like
just mention it to the doctor. Let the doctor know. And then also ask the mom. A lot of times kids don't get blood drawn.
Oh, okay.
And so they don't know until they're older. And if she is this young, that's not good. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And so just say, you know, just ask the question. You don't even have to recommend it. Oh, is the doctor recommending labs?
Yeah. I noticed she likes to eat salty foods too.
Who doesn't?
But that's like a
Salty,
sign of
crunchy
like that's one of the only things she'll eat is like pretzel or.
So that's a great question. Salty crunchy, because salty crunchy is another indicator. What would you say, Professor Vanessa?
Yeah, salty crunchy is yes.
Is kind of a dopamine seeking and sensory seeking, and yeah.
Yeah.
And no matter what, you still start medical. You still
Yeah.
default to medical. So you want a clean body, you want a clean lab, and then you start going developmental.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
And it sounds like if she's already getting speech therapy, mom should be ruling this out. So if mom is happy with her pediatrician and these things have been done, then check and move on to developmental.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I did read an article a number of years ago that was like one of the Jonas brothers was like, yeah, I was just like thirsty all the time. Juvenile diabetes.
Yep. And that's the thing. When they're this young, it's juvenile. And then that means that their body's not making insulin. And so they're very, very skinny. And so you go, oh, they're not diabetic. Like, what's wrong with them? Like,
Right.
but their body. And so what happens is they tend to go have a seizure, or they go into a coma. Like it gets very serious
Real
fast,
quick.
because they're not making it at all versus not making it accurately, like level 2.
Right.
So you want to get that checked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Great questions. Just keep your eye on it and just keep that mom in your corner. Absolutely. And that
But-
child's already going to be ahead of the game.
Right? But making sure you don't diagnose, that's very key. Like, not like, I think your child.
Don't do
No,
it.
we don't do that.
Don't do it. Talk about losing your parent partner. Talk about putting a parent into a tailspin. And by the way, if you were in a public school, you could be held liable for things like
Right.
this. I mean, that is not
Right.
good.
Right?
Yeah, our boss won't let us. She's like, no, be careful.
Like literally,
Yeah.
if if my child was in a public school and even his one-on-one aide said, you really should try like bubble therapy.
Right. Or a diet.
Yeah, or you should try, I've heard it. You should try essential oils. And like, okay. Even if they say that, I can hold the district liable for providing me that service at their cost.
Right.
Because an employee of their, and by the way, those things have been said to me. I was like, oh God, I don't have the bandwidth to pursue that. But like the second, oh, have you tried taking him to Taekwondo? Oh, let's call an IEP and see who's going to pay for that. So you just gotta be careful what you say. Anything that comes from an employee of that school or that school district, the school could be on the hook for that. It depends. Like you could have a tiger mom who's also a lawyer. So just don't do it. Don't do it. Talk to your director, your master teacher, your administrator, whoever, owner. Let them. And I did jump a slide, but the funny thing is that when this book was written in what, 2017?
17.
Like, ooh, digital textbooks was big. Now they're like everywhere. And so we're even trying to look at this class, and getting a digital textbook would be great. And then this whole like thing about Bookshare. I really like these Iris modules from Vanderbilt. It's a whole like saying Harvard for the Center for Developing Child. Vanderbilt also has like this whole like special education section too. It's very, very, very cool. So again, the way our education system has expanded so rapidly, we are really inviting everybody to have an education. And again, but we still have those little hiccups. Like again, somebody's homeless or doesn't have the internet and things like that. So accommodations, there's a lot of different things that we can do for kiddos, right? It kind of depends on what they need. They can include a bunch of different supports, but again, get to know the child, get to know the family, have that. Once you develop a strong partnership, you'll know what that child needs. And then once you get to know the child, you know, as their needs change. So some accommodations kind of look like this. If a kid can't write, maybe they can do the voice to text. So that is an accommodation on my son's. Is like he can write, but the behaviors that come with the writing are not equal to what he knows and he can say, right? So he can either voice text it or he can have somebody scribe it for him. Because like, here's the bottom line. Yes, he's got dysgraphia, but can he type? Yeah. Can he talk? Sure. Does he know the answer? Yeah. So it's not like, oh, you have to write, right? Little ones, we're going to get to a point where we make that distinction. We didn't make that distinction with him until he's about 9 or 10. Let's not fight on the writing situation. Let's move into something where he can actually show what he knows. And let's look at the accommodation, right? Okay, so again, note takers, digital text, extended time, breaks, flexible, all these different things. He's worked separately, he's worked together, he's worked 5-second breaks, 3-second breaks, do odds, do evens. Like you just kind of got to get to know the kid And again, sometimes you might have all these listed down and you only need the one, or you need the one and then they morph into needing the next one. So again, sometimes as an educator, you're pulling out your bag of tricks. You're pulling out your bag of tricks. And at the same time, sometimes he can write the stuff and he's like, I don't want to write it. Can you write it for me? And then you have to play the game there too. You have to be like, well, I'll write the odd numbers and you can write the even numbers. So sometimes we're like doing math homework and we're passing a pencil back and forth until he gets irritated with me. And he's like, I'll do it. So sometimes you just have to get to know the student and see what they work for. Sometimes they're really highly motivated by just being done with the work, negative reinforcement. When you're done with this work, let's move on. And it might be uncomfortable for them, but maybe there's things that they can do versus what they can't do. It's just you as a professional. It's really good to figure those things out. And again, those things change from day to day sometimes. But again, just be aware and be responsive. What can teachers do to reduce barriers? I know a lot of times when teachers set up classrooms, they don't necessarily think of what all kids need and things like that. But this whole fully inclusion, this whole model that's coming out, and it's been going on for years and years, sometimes we are seeing better accommodations just naturally. And so it's interesting. I've seen now in some of the schools where they have different kinds of chairs, higher chairs, bouncy chairs, squishy chairs, rocky chairs, and this is gen ed. So they're getting kids and then they rotate these chairs and things like that. So I think education and teachers are getting a little bit more open to like, how do I invite all students to play? How do I have enough space and egress for kids to be able to come and go? How do we have this child be able to work at this table and at this table, things like that. So these are some things that you can just keep in mind as you're moving forward. And again, some kids are taller than others. Some kids are shorter than others, right? And so just keep all these different things. Early intervention, of course, is the key. The quicker you get in there, like if you figure these things out really, really early, PKU is one of those really interesting ones. It's very, very rare. I don't even know what that looks like in the classroom. It's phenylketonuria, and it has to do with an amino acid protein that causes, like if you have a child who's exposed to, and I think it's phenylalanine. It's like certain, you might see it on like a Diet Coke, like on a bottle of Diet Coke, it says warning contains phenylalanine. And it's basically saying, don't give this to your newborn. And you're thinking, who would give a newborn Diet Coke? Don't get me started. Happens. What happens is that once it gets into the body, it kind of creates this reaction to where it creates intellectual disability and even physical malformation. See, it's really interesting. It's kind of like if the kids are not exposed to it, they're fine. But if they are, it's like this cascade. Very, very rare. But again, you might have kids in your program who may have had that as an effect. I just don't know what it looks like. Congenital hypothyroidism is again when the thyroid's not working well. Oh, toxoplasmosis is what we talked about earlier, is that thing that gets into your brain. Again, you could actually get toxoplasmosis from like sand at the park. So I don't want people to freak out about it, but especially when kids are, sand, they all do it. You're like, don't do it. Yuck, yuck, yuck. And they do it again. It's fantastic. Cystic fibrosis, again, is a lung disease. That's a genetic issue. Sickle cell disease, genetic. And a bunch. Again, the earlier we get in there, the less dire or less lifelong or less chronic these symptoms can be. Okay. Again, health emergencies at schools. Again, seizures are an interesting one. And we'll talk more about that in a sec. But again, take health, safety, nutrition. We talk in there. I taught that one last semester with Professor Johnson. She's amazing. We talk about all these universal precautions and what it looks like. A lot of the videos that I put in here about different seizures. And there's also like nursing students who kind of like do it like a fake setup, but at least you get to see it, right? I worked with a 2-year-old who had drop seizures, and they look like this. About 150 a day, a 2-year-old. It was heartbreaking. And by the way, it wasn't epilepsy. It was a tumor. It was a brain tumor. So seizures don't necessarily mean epilepsy. They can mean that there's something there. So he was having his 2nd year growth spurt, and then the tumor flared up. He lost his ability to walk and talk he was saying mommy and stopped being able to talk. It's hard. It was really, really hard. He was babbly and yeah. So again, watch the videos. And one is, I think, a high school student who's like doing color guard or something like that. And she just starts, having, and then the other one I think is the nursing students, but it's good to see the different types. There's also different ones that are even very more subtle. I put here all these different, these different examples. The absent seizure could be almost look like a daydream. You might not even notice what it looks like. One of my very best friends, she was an RSP aide and she was working with a student who had the accommodation to do her, I think her large scale assessment, like the CASPB or something like that, 3rd grade, on the computer. And so she was working on the computer. My friend's sitting here and noticed, if you look at the cross, you can see somebody's eye, that it was twitching, like her eye would twitch like every other minute or every 3rd minute. They would twitch. And she just mentioned it to her teacher, who mentioned it to the mom, who got her tested, and yeah, she had epilepsy. So again, if you see something, say something. And by 3rd grade, nobody knew. It was a little bit of an absent seizure. So tell me how that 3rd grader is supposed to be academically on par when their brain is literally like hiccuping or sneezing, like how it's amazing. I think kids are so resilient. Kids just like keep going. Like, how do you know that's not normal if that's your normal?
What about because there's a child like blinks super hard, but and it holds it, is that a form of a seizure?
Would be.
I don't know. See, again, we're not diagnosing,
Mhm.
but you're saying like they blink, like they scrunch their face when they blink, or they just blink.
Yeah, scrunch their face when they blink. Mm-hmm.
I would always default to medical.
Right.
Always.
Like to the mom, like you said earlier, have you noticed when he or she does that? Yeah.
And I would videotape it. If I were the mom, this is what I would videotape it, because she won't do it in the doctor's office.
Never.
Like the car. So I would videotape it. And then doctors now, I can send links to my doctor and be like, my kid has this weird rash. What is this? And they'll look at it and they'll say, oh, come in or no. That's the weirdness about a seizure. I mean, I've seen for as little chairs I've worked with is as many seizures as if we've worked with. Mm-hmm. They all look so
different.
And so if there is any odd neurological behavior, always default to seizure. Mm-hmm. Always go to the doctor first and then secondary not. And most of the time it's not, especially if they're on the spectrum, because they do have odd sensory seeking behaviors. Yeah, stereotypies that are just, they blink longer. Yes, they'll flap, they'll shake. But you still want to rule it out. And a large percentage of children diagnosed with autism have seizures. They acquire them later on through their life. And so it's not a one-time test. It's an every year test. You have to be the advocate, the fighter that naturally comes out like a tiger mom, always go medical first, because right. God forbid you would hate it to be a tumor, like she just said, sitting on the frontal lobe or something like that, and you had no idea.
Right. Absolutely. I tell you, my kid is that kid who has the twitchies. He still flaps. He still does a little scrunchies. He does a face. He'll shake things off, and you're like, okay, let's just let it out, whatever. One time we were at Disney and he was watching the newer parade. I want to say it was like the Pixar parade, and everything's LED lights, and I can get overwhelmed really quick. And we had him sitting on a trash can, and he literally kind of he just got overwhelmed, but kind of just spaced out. He was, for my kid who was hyper verbal and super hyper, he just got tonic for a good 2 minutes, and he just was and we were like, oh my God, is he having a seizure? Because it wasn't that he was doing anything. It was the absence of doing things. Mm-hmm. And, and it never showed up again. And he has since seen the parade or whatever, but there was changes in his behavior. the following year and the following year. And yeah, I kicked door downs to get an fMRI for that kid. I said, I just need to know topographically if there's a tumor in there. I just need to know he has this history and that history and this change in behavior. And they're sure enough, we did it and everything's clear. But again, there's like 7 different types of brain things, and fMRI just will show you if there's a dot in there. That's it. And then
that's
clear.
And that's the hard part. So that's great. So, I mean, it's just like anything else that's weird. You just start going down a checklist. But if there is seizure activity and it's not a tumor or something like that, they can be very hard to catch. The doctors will start with an EEG. Unless they are seizing, it's not red. Then the child can go to an MRI. That will be more conclusive, but they are hard. If the easiest thing to do is videotape it.
And
Absolutely.
there's lots of moms who've put it on YouTube.
Mhm.
These are just some of the examples that are out there. And again, so things like this, like a kid like this, I mean, he is a typically developed child who may have maybe cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy, where his muscles aren't doing well, his joints aren't doing well. But he, you know what? He could be right on track academically. He could be gifted. Again, this is kind of, again, what you would see maybe in a gen ed class. He just has to have a different way to sit. He has to have his cane or whatever like that. But again, the point of this part is that work with your related services, work with your team. Again, you don't have to be good at everything. You just have to have an idea of what the other professionals have figured out, like what this child needs, right? Sometimes they need the PTOT. And again, it could be a push in, it could be a pull out, it could be half the day, it could be a special school, it could be like, again, this child may be in a gen ed classroom, but I mean, as long as he is cognitively in with his peers, remember, least restrictive environment. And so he could be there, or he could also have ID in addition to this. So this one right here, it says the ability to play outside and move independently is a joyful part of life for all children. I'm telling you, Peyton was on a baseball team, and I forget what it was called. Oh, it was called the Challenger League. And there was kids from the age of, I want to say 4 or 5 to 26. And there was kids in wheelchairs, walkers, low vision, low hearing, ID, missing limbs, like all kinds of different stuff. And it was really kind of cool because I didn't realize there's like this whole community of like, I lecture about the community and I like live in it at home. And then I got there and 2 things occurred. Number one, I had a student and her son there. I was like, why do you look so familiar? Student and her child. I was like, fantastic. And my kindergarten babysitter's neighbor. I was like, why do you look familiar? Went to high school with my brother, but I was like, why do you blah, 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 blah. It was so weird. It was like this weird. Oh, and then the lady who did the samples at Trader Joe's, she was in there with her daughter. And I was like, why is it that it really is a small world? And so honestly, I didn't realize that I needed the support as a parent. And the first couple games I went to, I was crying. I was like, oh, this is the most beautiful thing, because you're at this field where there's like all these kids, and it was like these parents are like, yeah. And by the way, they didn't all hit the ball. We like kicked it out in the field and blah, blah, blah. And then over there, there's a diamond. Over there's a diamond. And those parents are like going nuts. And those kids are like sliding and all. But it's like, we didn't need any of that pressure. We just were here in this moment of like, are we dressed up in this outfit and are we playing along? And it just was a really great thing to see variations in skills. And and just, I'm telling you, it just was like so heartwarming for me. I realized that I was missing a big piece as a parent. So always tap into your community, and your community at your school is going to look like this. It's going to be your nurses and your PTs, your OT. You're going to be your psychologist. You're going to be like, I'm telling you, it's going to be all the people you end up knowing. And it is a small world, even as professionals. You start to know, even if there's a nurse here and then they went to another district, you end up running into people. It's pretty amazing. So people in situations, again, this is the history. Again, we haven't always done a great job, but we're doing better as we go. Has PF treatment of people been fair? Not necessarily. Again, our country didn't always have accommodations and modifications, or at least universal design for learning, but now we have it. I haven't traveled really overseas in a wheelchair, but what I understand and I hear people, it's like, no, there's no elevators, there's no stairs. And like certain countries, it's just like you have that disability and that's how it works. We sometimes don't do a great job and there's places where we could do better, but we're getting there. We're getting there. And then remember, universal design helps all of us. Rocker switches rule, like all these cool grippy things. Even my hairbrush has like a kind of like a squishy grippy thing on it. Or like wider doors, right? Or anything that, I mean, sometimes I've seen people on their walking with their cell phone in their hand. And I'm like, I literally said to myself, I'm so glad there's bumps on the sidewalk before they get to the street. I can't tell you how many times I see people like walking in a parking lot. Have you seen it? It's so annoying. That drives me crazy. But there's things that we are doing as a society that help everybody. And so again, this goes back to chapter 1, looking at everybody here, right? Personal stories. And I love this one here. There's different, this is the hole in the wall gang camp. And I really love how the chapter talks about this, and it gives me like the chilly willies to talk about it. But it's mostly for kids who are more like really, really ill. But it was put together by Paul Newman, and he was an actor and whatever. And so it's this killer camp. And we're way over time, but at the same time, please look at it. It's in the module. It's for kids with cancer, and it's like, it's a beautiful thing. And I'm like, hey, I want to go to that camp. Oh, this one's way back there. Bring this to the front. Oh, I remember this one. This is not just Darth Vader helmet. It's a Darth Vader. When they're saying Darth Vader has a disability, as a speech impairment. And that's actually a gargoyle or like a downspout on, I want to say like the Library of Congress or something in DC. It's something like that. Oh, we don't need it there because it's on the next page. Here we go. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, Darth Vader has a speech impediment.
The National Cathedral in Washington, D.C.
There we go. National Cathedral. They're like, okay, well, you know. And then here's the theory of everything. This was Sir, what's his name again?
That was the movie on Hawking's.
Yes, on Sir Stephen Hawking. So if you haven't seen the movie, just watch the trailer. It's very, very heartwarming. It's very, very cool. Best actor of the year on that one. He got the Oscar for that one. Future perspectives. Again, this talks more about technology and how we can, you know, how research is getting better all the time. Let me get this one out of there. And then we know more as we keep going forward, right? Sometimes we can identify accidents and diseases, but again, early intervention always. Again, universal healthcare precautions. I am glad to know that people are a little bit more aware of universal healthcare precautions. Like, I don't know about you, but I remember people saying, oh, why do Asians wear masks? I'm thinking, genius. It's going to be part of our society for the rest of our lives, right? I was a house, like, I'm not a big, like, antibacterial fan, but yeah, I am now. Like, so there's these things where it's like, let's be more aware. And I think people have also learned the difference between a cold, the flu, a virus, and allergies. People are trying to be a little bit more aware of what's happening in their person. And so again, if we just think about this, if we got more children involved and what their body was doing, giving them language on how to describe it, how to take care of their person. Like, I just look at it like, I was probably in my 20s when I figured out I had seasonal allergies. And I'm like, now I'm like talking, and again, the thing I learned about asthma and talking to my son about, I feel like if the younger people can kind of get it, then they can share that. And like, we are getting better as a society. So hopefully that's the silver lining. That's a silver lining to COVID. I mean, it's been really drastic to get people smart about their health, but if this had to happen this way, it had to happen this way, sadly but truly. Prosthetic and robots, very cool. I also put one of these is a video about a kid who built his own prosthetic arm out of Legos. It's fantastic. Again, technology is getting better and better and better on those sorts of things. And even people who couldn't walk before can walk or have a different type of wheelchair. It's just amazing. And they're also doing like neuro implants and all kinds of stuff. It's just, And again, this is like a couple years old, but at the same time, Sue Austin is this is watch this one. She's a woman who I think had MS, confined to a wheelchair, scuba diving in her wheelchair. She learned how, and then she like retrofitted her like with like little fans, and so now she can like, it's mind-blowing. And she also does this thing where she does art with her wheelchair. It's unbelievable. Oh, is that it? That's it. So a lot of different things. Again, I put this up in unit 2 because it's a little bit more of part of our society and we are a little bit more familiar with it. But in the classroom, like, yeah, like Professor Fernandez says, not as common. But again, this is an intro class. This is certainly not everything you're going to learn ever in this class. This is just like, let's plant some seeds, like in the back of your head. And so when these things do show up in your world, whether as a professional, a parent, or, you know, in the future in any regard, you'll have an idea. You have an idea of how this works. Woof, we covered lots of stuff tonight. I will take 2 questions, one from each of you, and then we can go. What do you still want to know? What are some things that are confusing? What are some more questions that you might have? Anything for the chapter?
Okay, so I know I keep bringing up about like the IEP and the 504, but
always
it's because of like all these like disabilities that are under each group and how they have different meanings of like the IDEA and everything.
Yes.
If a child, say for instance, has dyslexia or I don't know, like the ones that we're learning about now, asthma, is that labeled in the IEP process or 504? And like if they can't really like express how, or if something is bothering, or if we don't know if there's like not a diagnosis yet, how can we help, or how is that labeled under there, like in the IEP?
Okay, so are you so just to remind me, are you working with little ones or older ones or all age ranges?
I'm working from kinder to 6.
Okay, so okay, so we call that school age. Okay, cool. Kinder to 6. All right, kinder to 6th grade or kinder to 6 years old?
Kinder to 6th grade.
Okay, so 5 to 10 ish, plus or minus. Okay. Okay, so first of all, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. Okay, so first of all, don't stress yourself out and be like, all these kids have stuff and I don't know it yet and I don't know how to help them. Help them in the moment with what we know. Start there. What does this child need in this moment to help them, right? To regulate, to stabilize, and things like that. Just remember, when a child is diagnosed from a doctor, it's the parent's rights or option to share that with the school. Sometimes there are issues with children that parents will not share with the school for whatever reason. Now, I can tell you things like HIV is still very, very protected. But at the same time, that's a hard one because sometimes children don't know that they're HIV positive. Right? So why would you go tell a school other than that's the right thing to do? But at the same time, if you're a teacher and you have an HIV positive child in your class, if you use your universal precautions, as in gloves and things like that, you will not catch HIV from this child. So do we really need to know that they have it? Or would that create a bias and fear that then would change your way of, right? So whether or not HIV is on the IEP, I mean, it's like you want it on there, but at the same time, again, what if you have a child who has dyslexia and we just haven't identified it yet? Would you treat them differently? No. It's kind of like it's a hard thing to know, because just know that for all the students that you work with, yeah, they might have something show up later. They might have, you know, again, you could even have a typically developed child who goes out on spring break and has a boating accident and comes back and has to learn how to walk and talk again. So we're not looking to the future on how to treat a child. We're looking to how to treat them now. So things like here in this specific chapter, let me do that, and then I'll ask you if there's anything more to clarify. So for example, let's go back here. Let's say you have a child like this who looks like a typically developed healthy boy. He just happens to have an arm missing at the elbow down, and he has a prosthetic. Would you give him more time on a test? Not necessarily. Would you give him a distraction-free environment? No, not necessarily. Would you let him work from home if he had to see his specialist that day and was going to skip a half a day of school? Maybe. Do you see what I'm saying? So does he need a full IEP? Not necessarily. Even though you're thinking, oh my God, he's missing part of an arm. He needs no, not necessarily. He's categorized as needing some assistance, accommodation, and modifications under a 504 plan because there's nothing else present that needs extra support. But if this same child had autism and he was having sensory issues and itching and scratching, and he pulled that thing off and chucked it across the room and he could endanger somebody else, yeah, we have a full IEP. He's probably first categorized with autism because that's what the behaviors are, with an orthopedic impairment. Do you see the difference? Again, our eyes kind of play tricks on us. And I know that, Cece, you really care because this is a theme for you. You keep asking, what if we don't know yet? But a lot of times you're not going to know. Be present, help them in the moment. Because really, that kid is not a diagnosis. He's not a category. He's a kid. And by the way, he grew up this way with missing an arm. So he doesn't know it's anything different. He's like, yeah, whatever. That kid won't share the dinosaur with me. That has nothing to do with his arm. That's social emotional skill building for all kids, right? That kind of stuff. So did that answer a little bit? Because I know I kind of went off on a tangent.
Yes, it did.
It's hard, but keep asking these questions because the difference between a 504 and an IEP is really based on need. And again, maybe he had an IFSP as a child because he was a little kid trying to get used to missing an arm, and he needs less supports now. Again, as a reminder, go back to the IEP chapter. After 3 years, if IEPs don't have to keep renewing. They only keep renewing if the supports are needed. You don't have to have an IEP forever. You don't. Yeah, I have a friend of mine whose child was diagnosed with like developmental delay, pretty significant. And now he's in high school. He's on a 504 because he just goes to a special math class. He's like 100% normal. He's like normal high school kid who hates math. Couldn't get any normal. Right? You know, and he's like gangly and blonde, plays trumpet. He's like, it's like fantastic. You're like, oh my God, he turned out so normal. And she's like, I know. We weren't so sure. And so again, just be present with the child based on what they're needing from you in the moment. You're not a doctor, you don't have the diagnose, you're not even the director, not yet, right? You as a director, you just want to make sure that your staff is treating that child appropriately, fairly, right? It's always a struggle. Sometimes there's a point where like, am I being extra nice because I feel sorry for the child? That's a type of bias too. And that happens. You know, we're human. We're not perfect. We have our ups and downs. And, you know, like I shared with you guys earlier, I think, you know, girls get missed, but I like quirky girls, you know, I like hanging out with quirky girls. And then later you're like, oh yeah, they might have autism or some sensory processing issue. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe because I'm quirky and I've got those things too. So there's a piece where it's like, you know, just be present, just do what you need to do in the moment and just relax. They are not a summation of their disabilities. They're just a person who happens. By the way, that arm is cooler than anything I could ever buy or own, or better tattoos than he could even pay for. Right? So sometimes there's the empowerment that comes with that. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So I was going to say, please.
I could only add that you could have 4 kids with 4 different prosthetics here, and there is no straight answer. So 2 might require an IEP, one might require nothing, and one might want a 504.
Mhm.
So I think the takeaway from this is that there's never a puzzle. It's never an easy fit.
Mm-mm.
Every child is unique. The IEP is for educational idea, is for only education. Only education.
Mhm.
So if this prosthetic is affecting his education, then mom would ask for an IEP. If it's a civil issue, if he can't get into a bathroom,
Mhm.
that might be a 504. So does that kind of, so it's more like that, but every single child has to have its own pie. It cannot be, oh, you have a prosthetic, automatically IEP, or you have a prosthetic, automatically nothing, you're fine. Every single, you start from ground zero with almost like every single situation you tell me, I have like a little check mark, I go straight to the medical. And then after that, like, and you just start weaning out to the least amount of services to make this child most effective.
Because ultimately you don't want them dependent on services to create a normal life, or like that dignity of risk where they have this a similar thing, right? That just like the rest of us. So I look at it this. So here's another way to look at it. Let's look at it the extreme way. Let's say this kid right here. Let's say he's 10 years old. He's got this prosthetic. He goes through some serious depression. He is pissed. He's angry. He's throwing that prosthetic across the room. He doesn't want to wear it. He doesn't want to talk to people. He doesn't want to see a doctor. He doesn't want to eat. He's kicking over desks. Does that have anything to do with the prosthetic? No, not at all.
Typical 16-year-old kid. Like, here we go.
Correct. So you don't say, okay, well, let's give you an IEP for your prosthetic. No, that's not where his needs are at the moment. He's going through some emotional stuff. And you know what? Maybe there would be an IEP they would add on the emotional piece to get him extra support. But that wouldn't be on forever. And that can kind of come and go. That's second category. But again, a kid with a prosthetic can have zero IEP or 504 and just go through school and just be fine. I had a girl in one of my classes one time who had, it was called brachial palsy. And I had her in my class the whole semester, did not even know. One arm was this much shorter or longer than the other one. Like this, she just was born with one arm shorter. All the pieces were there, just one arm shorter. And she's like, oh yeah, whatever, blah, 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 whatever. I was like, oh, I didn't even know that. Brachial palsy. You can't, especially when there's an actor who has it and he just goes like this and you can't tell. Or they has one hand in a pocket and you can't tell. So it's this thing where it's like, was she on a 504 or an IEP? No. Was she in sports and did the whole thing? Sure did. So again, if the kid is presenting as angry or having sensory needs, then deal with the anger and sensory stuff, right? But it's not necessarily, again, our eyes do play tricks on us. And it's, again, don't get wound up in what you don't even know. Like we talked at the beginning, Molly was like, how do I ask questions? I don't even know. Sometimes you can get lost in your own thoughts that way. Like, what if? Just be present to what is instead of what if, because listen, we can all what if. Like, what if I get old and I lose my hearing? What if I get old and I lose my eyesight? What if I get old and I lose my ability to walk? What if I'm walking down the street and I get hit by a car? Like, no, we're not doing that, because those things will show up or they won't. But that has nothing to do with my moment to moment like need when I'm having like a little bit of a panic attack, right? So just be present with them. A student is not what their IEP is. IEP is just a piece of paper. That's it. Just be present. Yeah. That's all they want from you. They just want you. They just want someone not to look down on them or feel sorry for them or treat them differently. They just want normal. They just want what they think is normal. Yeah. Just be present. Just be human. Let the paperwork roll itself out. Later, you can do the paperwork. They're lucky to have you just in their bubble. Don't get too wound up about the paperwork. That stuff will materialize when it materializes. let people like Professor Fernandez take care of that business. So,
Yeah, now the paperwork's coming, let me tell you.
Yeah.
The better you talk, the more paperwork that comes.
Right. Okay, good. Molly, what do you have anything dangling questions?
I just want to know if well, I guess not symptoms, but like the behaviors of type 1 diabetes are the same or similar to autism. Or if we see, I don't know, because the way that like the kid that has it, the way he reacts is like an autistic kid, like having a fit and stuff, he gets like,
You mean a child with autism?
yes, sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's
I'm trying to
weird.
think
Yeah.
of how to word
You know, in
it.
the UK, they say autistics.
Yeah.
And you know what? As we go forward, just as a heads up, our discussion board in the autism chapter is like, okay, what if you were empowered by the word? What if you said,
Yeah.
instead of saying I'm a woman with autism, I'm saying I'm an autistic. I can use that. That's like saying I'm a bitch girl. That's me. Like I can use those things to self-identify. That's actually our discussion board for the ASD chapter. So right now, when you're talking about that child, use the person first, but later that child can empower and use that phrase otherwise. So yeah, go ahead.
Cool. He has similar things, but we realized that picture day was yesterday, or wait, what day is it? Yeah, yesterday. And he freaked out with the flash. And my lead was like, I know he has more, like nobody believes me, blah blah blah, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
But what?
Doesn't matter if he's got more or not.
I know. I'm like,
it's picture day and it's hell for him.
It's not, yeah. No, she seems to think that like, oh, she knows these things, but they still need to follow. I don't know. I'm not even okay. Anyway, not part of the question.
No, yeah, no.
Just annoying. Anyway, so he
right.
just has similar things, but because of the picture day, we thought, oh, maybe, and not only because of the picture day, like he gets very, he really, really likes pouring cups of whatever, water, stuff like that. He got really into the squishy, like sticky things that are on the window. He freaked out about the picture, and then what was the other thing? He did something else that was just very, he is one of the only kids at first that played with our kid that's autistic.
Other child with autism. Yeah.
And yes. And okay, so that kind of answers my question, I guess.
Right. So here's the thing. That's apples and oranges, diabetes and autism.
I haven't read any correlational data to say, I mean, especially if you're talking about a boy, there's differences in behaviors between girls and boys that are autistic. Mm-hmm. And girls present much higher functioning in terms of language. So when you see them a little bit more quiet, they may not be feeling well. So you could walk me down that pattern of a medical issue faster than you could walk me down a pattern of a boy. And I haven't read any correlational pattern between type 1. Type 1 is a serious medical condition.
Yeah.
But if you just go to the DSM, like your 3 areas of autism, again, not diagnosing, but just for you to identify, a language delay, a social delay, and the rigidity and restrictiveness.
All 3 of those. Yeah.
And so,
because I feel like the parents are so, this just happened. Like they just found out, like earlier in the year, they had a 3rd kid. They have a year older, and then they had a baby. And right when the baby was born, like spring of this year, they found out that like this kid, has diabetes. And so I think they're so wrapped up in that and figuring that out.
Yeah, parents can handle one at a time, not too many.
This is like not, it's kind of just not seen.
But okay.
And we took it. Yeah, the only reason I asked is because we took it, like when my boss and we all sat down, me and my lead teacher and my boss, and talked with the parents, and they informed us of like, okay, what happens, how he acts, like they wrote us out a sheet, like how do we work with it, blah, blah, blah. And so I've been the one he took to me and is like attached to me, won't leave my side. Yeah. And I'm the one who like has been figuring out his levels and stuff and what works and what to give him when. But the way that they explained it when he does get low, or even sometimes when he gets higher, I mean, higher, it's like they're not worried about it really right now because he's so young, but when he gets low, everybody kind of thought, like my boss too, were like, oh, it's similar because, you know, he gets like unstable and he gets angry and he starts to hit and do these things.
Okay. If I can interject really fast. So what you're just, I see what you're saying now. It's the chicken and the egg. So
Yeah.
versus, I don't know. So you have a child who has a medical condition. Mom and dad parent this child different than they parent not a child who's healthy.
Their other kids, probably. Yeah.
Exactly. And so now this child behaves because he's been reinforced in a manner that can look similar based upon environment, not on neurological impairment. They're two different things. So if the child is feeling weak and doesn't have the language to say, I need a cookie or whatever he needs, he's going to be fatigued. His muscles
You might even see.
Yeah.
Right. He's fatigued. Right. And then if mom and dad have been, reinforcing the behavior, it's going to continue. And
Meaning like they come in and they like rescue. That's that's very attention forming.
Yes. Yeah. And so then he goes to school and he says, I need to be around the person that's safest, like mom. And so
there's Molly.
Right. There's Molly. And so, so oftentimes you can create, I don't mean to take it down. Like if we took out the diabetes of this little kid and I just said you were at a restaurant and you're sitting at a booth and you have child A and child B, there are still brats in the world. There are still kids that are ill behaved because parents do not reinforce routine, structure, consequences. That doesn't make them autistic. It just makes them naughty. So we still have those kids in the world. They exist, guys. And we don't get to just diagnose everybody because we've been in an environment that reinforces the naughtiness, that reinforces the rigidity, that reinforces the repetitiveness. You have a boy who likes a little car and all of a sudden that's all he ever gets. That he's not rigid. It's all you ever gave him. Did you try giving him a block? Let's see what he'll do. And so this might be that second situation.
Yeah, because that's what I thought at first, because I don't know, because I know his brother and stuff, and like the parents are so, their parents are just, they're parents that I've said I wanted to be, because they like really took it upon themselves to learn everything they could. They informed us. They're even giving us our confidence in handling the situation the way we think, like the way we see it work, however many gummies I think he needs at that moment is okay. The parents aren't going to be, okay, Molly, are you giving him this many? They're letting us do it. And they're very like hands off of us. So I don't see them being as like, I mean, I guess, yeah, he gets more attention, of course, because they're worried and they have to be on him all the time. But my coworker is like totally convinced that he is on this, he's undiagnosed and he's on the spectrum.
I don't want to take that away. He absolutely could be.
But, but
you know what? Like I said to Cece, just be present and do what you can do in that moment. And you know what? That's another conversation about coworkers, because there's always the one.
It's so hard because she thinks that like every diabetic kid is the same. I'm getting heated now.
It's hard.
Kid with diabetes.
Child with.
Yes. And because she's had a kid who had diabetes in her class in the past. So she's like, this is not how they are. I know how they are. They're not like this. There's something more. And because of it, it's like, I don't know, you just see the frustration, and like, she almost gets as if like whenever there's somebody, especially the kids that are on the spectrum, she gets very like, well, they're in our class, so they need to learn, not like, let's figure out what works for them. It's like, okay, they need to learn it. They need to do this. They need to do that. And like, I'm in the class and it doesn't work.
I'm going to give you the papal wave right now. You may, and I'm not speaking for Professor Fernandez, I'm speaking for myself. You may throw me in front of the bus at any given time and say, my professor says, we're not here to diagnose, but you can say, if she gives you permission, In my class, I'm learning, we're not here to diagnose. We're just here to be present with this child's needs in the moment.
Yeah.
You're welcome to use what you hear in here as like blaming us.
Yeah. And I did that last time with like the little girl whose language delayed. And I was like, I like, because of this class, it's actually really good because it came up at the perfect time where we have this new class and I'm learning them things fresh. And she, she's been doing it 20 years and she's like, I haven't had that class in so many years. Like, it's a good thing you're in it, so I'm using that to my advantage.
New technology is showing us that.
Yeah. Yes.
Or the research, some of the newer research is uncovering the idea that take the blame off yourself, take the responsibility off yourself and be like, this is what the data said. This is what the professors are, this is what the book said, do that. Because here's another kiss of death professionally and even personally, the phrase, I've seen it all.
I know.
The second you say that, the universe will conspire to prove you wrong and show you new stuff you never thought possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would always say too, like I've struggled with families who I wish if you could just get a diagnosis, then we would get more hours. But then in my head, I'm doing everything what you could slap a big fat, I don't know, call me whatever you want. Would it change what I'm doing? If this child were diagnosed, would it change what you're doing, Molly?
Yeah. No, I mean,
no. And then if it would, you ought to change it before you ask the question.
Correct.
And so that's kind of where I think, like where I would be if I were you. Like, is there something we could be doing that we're not doing? If he had a diagnosis, then let's do it, because it's not the diagnosis that would make us do it. It's the behavior we're seeing that should make us do it.
Yeah.
Right? Why would you be waiting for a word to tell you to be
well, because then she can say, okay, they don't belong here and it's too much for us and we don't have the manpower, so you like push my boss into like getting
your boss is
out,
looking to
right?
escape. Yes,
Right.
your boss is looking
not
to
my
escape.
boss, but my lead teacher. Yes.
Lead teacher, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
My boss is like, we got this. It's fine. Like,
And
I'm like, I'm going to
is
get my bachelor's in special ed, so you can hire me for.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that I see some teachers who do that. I just want less students in my classroom. Listen, one leaves, you're going to get one or two more. Like, I mean, it's like not.
She wants robots. I mean, at this point,
Like,
it's just she wants everybody to say me.
And that you're going to get that no matter where you work. I don't care what industry you're in. You're going to get that no matter what. But these are great questions, you guys. These are very realistic. Like, oh, fantastic. And we're so actually after our meeting, when we literally talk how exciting it is to be present with you guys who are doing the work already. Who are doing the work already. You're in there, you're neck deep, like Cece, like your questions are because you care, like, you know what I'm saying? And hopefully we're learning from each other, because like, listen, I've taught this class for years, and then there's years where there's nobody who's actually working with the kids yet. And I'm like, when you start working with the kids, it's hard because there's a disconnect. It's like this, when you start working with the kids, no, you guys are like, oh, I see that. It works here. And I tried that over here. And it's like, oh, Jeff's kiss.
It's worked for that. Yeah. For that little girl who speaks Spanish. She like is saying, "Adada superhero." Like she's saying all these little words now, and she's saying things where it's still hard for like the other teachers to understand, but for some reason I've always understood Babel. Like when I was in daycare, they used to use me as the translator. I don't know what it is, but I can understand her. Like she asked me things today and like is using these sentences and like
That's
slowly so all it took was me just being like, oh, you speak Spanish. Okay, fine.
Again, but that's another piece of saying you were present in the moment. Basically, you bridged a gap into her world.
Yeah.
And that opened the door. Think of that for all of your people, Cece, like that too. What does this child need? If I help them feel more comfortable in this moment, in this environment, like it's like this blossoming thing. You'll see it. You'll see it. And then one last thing before I let us go. Sometimes when you get kids in a program with too much support, that can create another set of problems. Too much support. You're right. They become prompt dependent. They become like really, they won't do anything independent of themselves. And then sometimes they actually can thwart their development. So, I mean, I've seen prompt dependency. I just ran across it the other day in my house. And I was like, hey, buddy, you're doing really well. At 14, his AR reading's up, his math is reading up. He's almost at grade level for everything. When he was ahead and then was behind, and now he's like whatever. And I was like, hey, there might be a time, he's in a special school, and so there's a lot of support in the school. If he was in a regular high school, he would be mortified probably right now to have a one-on-one aid, right? And I was like, hey, there might be a time where you don't need Mr. Phillips so much. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, my kid might be a little prompt dependent, like might be a little bit extra helping, but he's also attention maintained. So basically he has a captive audience of attention. And so to break him from that would be very difficult. And so chances are we're going to write this one out for 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. And he's going to be like, what do you mean I'm graduating high school? Where's Mr. Phillip going to go?
Is he
No,
coming
Mr.
with
Phillip's
me?
moving in. So
I
like,
have 2 more things. One's off the record, but one is
Okay.
kind of on.
Let me,
Wait,
I'll stop.
wait, not yet.
Okay, go ahead, go
Because the first one is that we really need help at our school. And so if anybody in the class is looking for a job,
Do you have a flyer?
they can talk to me now. It's kind of like a word of mouth school. So we don't have any, it's a little
Yeah.
private thing. And
Can
yes,
you
it's
send us
called-
an email and then we'll post it as an announcement?
Yes. I'll get tomorrow. I'll get the Indeed posting or whatever from my boss
That would
and
help.
send it. Because we just need people
Yeah, and the
at least
Indeed
kind of
means
know
that
what they're
your
doing.
boss has paid for she's searching, so she paid for it. So let's get her.
Yeah.
get some
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, and no, she's having a lot of trouble. Like normally, I guess she calls the school, like she'll call OCC and Golden West and stuff. Because we're in Huntington too, which
Sure.
I forgot to say. But yeah, so she'll call the schools and ask. But she's so busy right now. It's like I'm like, oh help! I'll put out a word or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you know anybody,
I
yeah,
will. I'll let him know.
yeah,
And then I'll stop recording.
yes.